Welcome to the Red, White, and You Show with Dean McMurray, the military medium.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another great episode of the Red, White, and You Show with yours truly, the military medium. Today, folks, I have a really great guest. Sean Wyman joins us today. Sean is how would you describe it, Sean? Are you a trauma facilitator, a trauma, what is the title that you go with? I know it's kind of unique, but.
I would say mental health fitness trainer is probably the when I really look at everything, I know some people want to say expert and stuff like that. I really don't ever see myself as an expert because I'm always trying to learn and grow and get better at what I do. So I would definitely say a trainer. I've always been a trainer at heart, and mental health fitness is where I've really focused my training.
Perfect. Well, regardless, welcome to the Red, White, and You Show, man. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to do this interview. And for those that don't know Sean's a veteran, a police officer, and a author, and just so much more, a trainer, a speaker, everything else in between. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Well, what's kind of funny, Sean, is because we were talking earlier about just the connection we had. And for those that aren't aware, is Sean and I served at Fort Campbell way back in, I would say the early 90s together. And that was back when General Petraeus was actually the battalion commander at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Petraeus. And for those that know the legendary Command Sergeant Major Purdy, the same one that was in Ranger battalions back in Vietnam, who was in books,
Delta,
that was that
guy.
That guy's been all over, right? The same guy that stabs himself in the
survived the Desert Eagle crash. One of the only survivors of that crash.
Right.
Yeah. Insane,
certainly
man.
a legend. They're both legendary, right? And it's kind of interesting that we didn't know it, that we were kind of part of, kind of the legacy of history. And really, which is interesting, Sean, is all that was kind of, I don't want to say the end of, but there's really no Vietnam veterans still serving anymore. And that was kind of the end. I remember my first sergeant being, Command Sergeant Major Purdy, one of the few remaining veterans that I knew of the Vietnam era that served and lived through it, those near ambushes that he lived through and everything else. But,
man.
and it was just absolutely crazy. So certainly a crazy time, and it was kind of fun catching up on that aspect because
were you at his retirement?
No, I wasn't. I'm trying to remember back that far.
I know, right? I remember. It's pretty scary, man. You just kind of helped me to remember that. I remember being at his retirement and them giving him the 45 caliber handgun and going, oh man, is this really a good idea right now? Because remember, he was the one who wanted to shoot everybody in the leg at Ranger Battalion
and make them do a
25-mile road march.
And I don't want to, we certainly don't want to, for people that don't know who he is, we don't want to paint a negative picture for him because he was the world's best leader, one of the best leaders that I've seen. However, he was riding the rails of maybe being on the other side. But I would share is if you've never been on a live fire range with the man, it puts a P in pucker factor, because him and his driver, I remember, would go and grab just 2 cans of 5.56. Mm-hmm. And when we would have some tremendous live fire exercises, especially if you remember names like good Lord, I'm thinking of the Trench Line or Mount City. I think it was Dodge City. Just the crazy, just experiences, but they were great. It was excellent training for infantry and ground combat and just some of those things. But we're getting, we could talk.
I know, man. You and I could talk for hours. We could tell Purdy stories. Hey, the one thing I will say about Purdy, I would follow that man to hell and back. There's no doubt. Like, I knew if I followed him, I had the best chance of survival. Yes. He gave me the highest rate of survival in combat. There is no doubt about that in my mind.
I completely agree. And that, gave you a sense of security and I guess that's what the reason that I kind of went back to that is, here we were young men. And we're not, we're not that old, but it seems like,
I know, wait a minute. I know.
Here we were kids, right? And, we were really kids. And, here's this guy that was, I don't even know how old he was. He was, but just, hard as a rock. But you felt the confidence exude from him. And that's the thing that I wanted to bring forward, Sean, is do you feel that your time in the military and experiences with individuals like Command Sergeant Major Purdy, General Petraeus, then Lieutenant Colonel Petraeus, who, by the way, I want to add, because I think it's pointed, was you were a PFC at the time, and you were like the only one that he sent out a battalion as a PFC to Ranger School, and Purdy almost had a heart attack.
He did.
He's like, "What are you doing,
man?" I thought I was going to die that day. When I had to walk into the Sergeant Major's office and try to explain why a battalion commander was sending me to Ranger School as a PFC. He about lost it, man.
Right. Yeah. People have, let's just say people have, I guess, crushed their careers for less. And so it's under his watch. But just two tremendous leaders. And I really think that entire battalion, with all the companies, I know you were in Delta Company, I was over in Bravo Company, with 3rd Battalion 187 Infantry Rakkasans. And it was a tremendous time. It really was. It was like the Wild West, but it was very tremendous, hard training, crazy. But, do you feel that some of that, because I know you went on to serve after that, but do you feel that was one of the shaping points, like as you went forward and kind of what cultured a little bit in some of your speaking and then also the book?
I've never really thought about it from that direction until we just started talking about it. And I was like, wow, sometimes you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone. Right. And when I reflect back and I look at the leadership, not just at the upper echelon, man. My squad leader, Darren Hodge, Jeff Mittman, who ended up losing his vision in combat. Right, these were like rock stars that I look up to now and go, these were the men. And the Army really was my father figure, Dean, because up to that point, I really didn't have that father figure that you really need as a boy, right? And as you're developing into a young man. So I came with a lot of immaturity and a lot of emotional baggage when I came into the military.
Let's talk about that a little bit, Sean. Okay. You grew up in DC, right?
I grew up right outside, in the suburbs.
And just a really kind of a hard upbringing, a lot of interracial, how do I want to say, it was more, you lived in a diverse neighborhood.
Absolutely, man. I lived in a low income neighborhood right outside. Anybody that's from the DC area knows, man, the suburbs, Seat Pleasant, one of the worst areas right there in Prince George's County, in the heart of it, right? I mean, a lot of drugs, a lot of prostitution, a lot of crime, a lot of shootings. And back in my day, in that time, man, 9-year-olds were doing drive-by shootings in DC, man. Gangs were, it was murder capital of the world at that point. I think it was a fight between New York and DC back and forth on who was having more murders each year at that point.
That's crazy. You ended up actually, you almost made it. So I'm just reading your bio.
Sure.
It all came to an end when you almost made a fatal decision. What can I ask kind of what happened in that point in your childhood?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, my dad left when I was born. My mom and I were together, you know, as her being a single mom and me being raised by her for a few years till I was about 7. At that point, she met what she called at that time the man of her dreams. She fell madly in love with this guy, moved to Washington, D.C. because of it. And very quickly, the daydream became a nightmare. That's the best way I can explain it. Was this big, you know, the fairy tale became a nightmare. And, you know, my stepfather, man, he suffered from a lot of mental illness. He suffered from a lot of physical anguish and pain, back injuries, things like that. He was not only a drug user, but that brought him into becoming a drug dealer. And like I said, we went from having an income and stability and credit and all these things to when she came to DC, we lost all of that. And it was like he just took it away and he began to control and manipulate both of us. And I was mentally and physically abused for 3 years. My mom was mentally and physically abused for over 30 years. And over that time, you know, I was watching, it wasn't just physical abuse. You know, a lot of people think about physical. Right. The emotional, I think, was more detrimental to me. What he said to me, how he impacted me and led me to believe that I was worthless, right? I was absolutely nothing. I was, you know, less than anything under the bottom of his shoe, that he would take my life without even thinking about it. He would kill my mom and put her in the backyard. And one day, it was either one day she was going to find me buried or I was going to find her buried. It was a 50-50 which one was going to go first. And it came to a breaking point. We all come to a breaking point. And for me, that breaking point came at the age of 10. You know, my stepfather one night beat me to the point where I couldn't move for an entire week. And my mom came home after that beating because she was still working at the time. And I remember her trying to, you know, console me. And I was just wanted to reach up and give her a hug. And I couldn't do that. And it gave me so much anger and so much frustration. And I was like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. This can't happen anymore. And I began to get really evil thoughts in my head about ways to, I started thinking and preparing myself for how I was going to kill my stepfather. That's the simplicity of it. And my stepfather carried a firearm in his back pocket. It was a little .38. He carried it in his back pocket. He showed it to me all the time. He bragged about it. He talked about if a cop ever pulled him over, get ready because he was going to shoot a cop. I mean, we had these conversations in the car while he was running around selling drugs. He was basically preparing me for that combat if it happened. So I knew he had the gun. So after I could move again, I packed my bags. And my plan was to go into the bedroom, shoot my stepfather, grab my backpack and run and never come back. That was my plan. So I go in, I go to the, you know, my mom is on the right side, my stepfather's on the left side. And I go in and I go around to the left side. And sure enough, the firearm's right where I knew it would be, the little .38 in the left back pocket. I pull it out. I go to the foot of the bed. I punch it out. I point it right at my stepfather, you know, point it right at his head. And I put my finger on the trigger and I start pulling the trigger back. And, you know, I always say I was one trigger pull away from changing my life because I really was, man. Right. And it's only by the grace of God that gun didn't go off. And I know that now. I know with all my heart and all my soul that just wasn't meant to be my destiny. And I thank God every day that it wasn't. But at the very last moment, I stopped, I released the trigger, I put the gun down on the bed in between my mom and my stepfather, just literally placed it down, grabbed my backpack, and I ran away. And that was a changing point because from that point on, you know, and I never thought about it so much later in life, what it was like. Who woke up first? Was it my stepfather or my mom? Who discovered the gun? Was it my mom or was it my stepfather? All I know is 3 days later, I got caught by the police. I was staying at a hotel in a lobby and I fell asleep and they got me. They called my mom. They're like, hey, great news. We found your son. And my mom made it very clear. I'll never forget these words. She said, he can never, ever come back here again. Wow. Ever. Made it very clear. He is not coming back here. And I know now why. At that time, I felt abandoned and neglected. Yeah. And you know, the devil has a great way of creating perception versus reality. And the perception was my mom gave up on me. My mom abandoned me, threw me to the wolves, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I know there's got to be a lot of people out there, probably in your audience, that can relate to that have felt abandoned, have felt alone, have felt neglected, you know, and for a long time. all the way through the military, I felt that I had that anger in me. That's why I was so good in the military, because I had that anger, and it gave me a way to channel it in a positive way. Right. Compared to in school, when I was bullying and being bullied and getting in fights and doing stupid things as a kid and getting arrested, and, going into the military was my saving grace, because that's really where I found that father figure, if you will.
Right.
So I go into foster care. I end up, a ward of the state of Maryland, basically. And I start going from group home to group home to foster home, bouncing around to different schools and just going all over the place.
And that was really the case until you were old enough to really join the military on your.
Well, I was about 16 when I found what I would call a stable environment. Right. I actually found a foster home where they gave a damn, and they gave me some stability. I really didn't have that father figure. He really didn't know how to be a father. He tried. I mean, I'm not going to take anything away. He tried, and he, they gave me the stability to be able to graduate high school. I was able to finish high school. I'd always been a hard worker, man. I've been working since I was 12 years old to make my own money, to make my own living. And I never wanted to fall into the lifestyle that I saw my stepfather live. I never wanted to live in a house with no running water and no electricity again. I didn't want to be a wife abuser or a child abuser. I was terrified that I would become that. I really was for a long, long time. And, going through that time between 16 and 18 was critical. And, having that stability was very helpful. I had friends, I had resources, but in the back of my mind, I didn't want people to know what had happened in my past. So I started just tucking it away and pretending like it never happened. And my thought was, as long as nobody else knows what happened, then I can keep it here. I can keep it under control and everything will be fine. I didn't realize how powerful the brain is and all the things that I would learn later on in life about, storing memories and how they have to keep coming back up until you address them.
Right. No, absolutely. So did you, so you went in the military. How many years did you end up serving?
8 years. I went in 92 and I got it out in 2000.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you for your service, by the way. And then did you get right into law enforcement? Is that something that you just kind of fell right into?
I did. I tried to go into CID in the military, but I had gained too much. I gained too much rank. I was an E6 or a staff sergeant. And I had ended up over at Fort Rucker, Alabama, working with the Warrant Officer Basic School over there. And I had an opportunity to shadow CID, and they really wanted me to. I put my application in and everything, and tried to get picked up, but I had too much rank. They wouldn't pick me up. So it was at that point that I realized, I was like, okay, well, I've got to figure something else out, because I had a son that had just been born. And I had to make that decision. Was I going to be a father or was I going to be a soldier? And they wanted to send me to Fort Lewis to Ranger Battalion, which, would have been an amazing experience if it wouldn't have been under the certain circumstances. But because it was, I didn't want to be my father. I didn't. And so that was an easy decision for me. I knew I had to get out and I had to find another way. And that's when I started going after law enforcement. And it just so happened that a good friend of the guy that I was working under in CID knew the recruiter, was friends with the recruiter at Tallahassee Police Department. And they were talking one day in person, introduced me and said, hey, Sean's looking to get out. He's looking for a law enforcement job. One thing led to another. And I got hired by the Tallahassee Police Department in early 2000.
Are you currently still with them? Are you still with the department?
I am. I'm almost 22 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
Congratulations on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
Time sure flies. Yeah.
It does.
Awesome.
It does.
So kind of going into, how did this book kind of come about?
Which book?
Well, sorry, I should go back. So you wrote Let Go, the Movement Process, right? And then you co-authored a book, Going Beyond the Call, Mental Health Fitness for Public Safety professionals.
Yes.
So how did let go, the movement process, how did that all come about?
Man, that is a great question. So, it makes me smile now because I look back at it and I'm like, wow, that was an incredible moment. So after I got out and I got into law enforcement, remember now, I get into law enforcement, I still hate my mother. I'm an alcoholic at this point. I've been drinking since I was 12. Okay. And I'm like 27 or I'm 27 years old, still drinking heavily. I'm $150,000 in debt now because I just got into a divorce with my ex-wife. Oh, by the way, I'm a single father as well. I'm carrying credit card debt, mobile home debt. I got debt coming out of my ears, man.
Right.
And on top of that, I've never dealt with the fact that I almost killed my stepfather. I've never dealt with those things, right? Now, when you expect me to be at my best as a police officer and you're at your worst as a citizen in distress, that's what was showing up, Dean. And it took me a while to learn and to realize that I didn't realize that till much later. But, I reflect back on that now and I realize, wow, I'm really lucky that I didn't hurt somebody or somebody didn't hurt me because of that, because of the coming into that environment in that way, right? It's so important, especially coming into this profession, that you do take care of your personal issues and you do address your past and you do address the things that can trigger you in this job. Sure. So with that being said, I met my second wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and we dated. And, I wanted to do things the right way the second time. Unfortunately, the first time things were rushed and they weren't done for the right reasons and the right way. And I never wanted that to happen again. So my wife led me back to God, basically. And through that, I went to a retreat. And in that retreat is where I basically heard the voice of God basically telling me, look, there's so much I can do with you, but I can't do anything with you till you go back and you start facing your past and dealing with it. And so I started really reflecting on that and looking at that and trying to figure out how to do that. And one thing led to another, and it led to me writing a book and writing out all of the things that I remembered and as I wrote the book, it's crazy because the book only took a month to write. Okay. But the time to be able to get the content for the book was over a half of my lifetime, basically, or a quarter. At least a quarter of my lifetime. Right. Because, understanding, learning, going, oh, wow, that's why that happened. And that's why this happened. But more importantly, learning the process that I was able to use to be able to navigate my past and be able to legitimately let go of it so I could move forward with my life. And that's why the book was titled Let Go. And the movement process comes because the movement, MOVEMENT, is the process that I teach in the book. So it's not just telling my story and woe is me. It's telling the story, woe is me, and then coming out the other side victorious through this process. And the process was so powerful, Dean, I wanted to share it with the world because I really felt like, holy cow, if everybody could grasp this really simple concept and run with it, everybody that had a notorious past could address it and deal with it and move forward with it. And as I wrote that book and I told my story, that was the vision that I had. And I never planned on writing another book. I didn't even want to write the first book, right? But, through that call, I did. And I'm so happy that I did. So happy that I did.
You bring up a great point. You talked about something, Sean, about, being a public servant. I get it. If we're breathing, we all have something. We're all dealing with something at some level. Not one of us is perfect, nor do we have a perfect past. However, those that are in the public servant role at some level, do you believe? Because I know that media. I know there's a part responsibility there with the media, but there's been a lot of attention lately with how do I want to say difficult behaviors maybe, or disciplinary measures, things that haven't been addressed at the public servant level. Do you believe that some of that past trauma that hasn't been dealt with is bubbling up now, and we're just seeing it because of the I guess influx of social media, and everybody has
I would say
cell
this.
phone.
I would say that it's always been there.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it just popped up one day, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
always been there, because you think about it, law enforcement throughout history has been a very violent environment, man.
Yeah.
We've seen, because they were put out there to deal with crime and to address high liability situations, right? To protect the communities that we serve, to do what, when the bullets are flying, we're running towards them when everybody else is running away from them. It's always been that way. It's never changed. It's still to this day. The other day had a situation where I ran into the fight, not away from it, because that's what we do, right? That's just what our calling is. That's why we're here. So understanding that, we have done a great job when it comes to talking about the high liabilities, the shooting, the firearms training, the defensive driving, the defensive tactics. We have done a horrible, and I will call any sheriff, any chief, any administrator out. I don't care who you are, any city government. We have done a horrible job when it comes to addressing the social emotional challenges, which is 90% of what a law enforcement officer addresses. We deal with shootings and fights and high pursuits less than 10% of our career, Dean. Right? When you look at use of force, it's less than 1% across the country, right? But the social emotional aspects of what we deal with is daily. Daily, we are dealing with people in some form of a social emotional aspect, and we are not trained. We are not prepared. We are not ready to address that. So, of course, and let's just talk pre-COVID. Let's talk, before natural disasters. Let's just talk in the law enforcement general environment without any outside interference. Okay. Without the active shooters, we'll keep active shooters in there because that's been there in history, right? But without the natural disasters, without the COVID, without the protests, without the defund the police movement, even before all that, it was a highly traumatic job. It was a lot of chaos, a lot of emotional. And what were we taught? We were taught, suck it up, drive on. That's what your job is about. You just deal with it and you move forward because that's what you have to do. And that's what the expectation was. And unfortunately, it is still the expectation today, although we are now finally starting to flip that switch. But you have less than 20% of organizations across the country that even consider the mental health aspect of a law enforcement officer as important, let alone critical. Right? It's critical. And this is why it's critical. We kill ourselves far more than any other high liability that comes against us. Any shooting, any pursuit, any knockdown, drag out fight, we kill ourselves by our own hand far more than any of those do. For the last 6 years in the state of Florida, we've been in the top 5. And for the last 3 to 4 years, we were in the top 3, Dean, yet nothing is done about it. But it's not just Florida. It's California. It's Texas. It's New York. It's everywhere. Right. It's everywhere. But those seem to be the top 5, right? Those top 5 states seem to be always in the mix, right? Between Florida and Texas and New York. I mean, those are the guys that are kind of, and California, got to keep California in there, right? And I think Chicago is right in there too. So at some point, where's the turning point? How many lives have to be lost? 32. Think about that for a minute. It's March. 32 suicides this year, Dean, in law enforcement alone. 32. That doesn't include dispatchers. That doesn't include corrections. That doesn't include EMS. That doesn't include our firefighters. And guess what? They're even higher depression rates and suicide rates and divorce rates and than us. We just seem to be in the limelight and be in the picture more. But those guys need that help just as much as we do. And that's why I became so passionate about writing or co-authoring Going Beyond the Call, Mental Health Fitness for Public Safety Professionals, because nobody was addressing the educational preparation side. And there's so much when it comes to suicide awareness. And that's amazing. That is awesome. That is so important. But what would happen if we would start educating and preparing and training on the front end, right? Yeah. How many more lives would we be able to save? How many more people would we be able to get into those preventions and help them to appreciate what's out there and understand those resources before it became a place where it was too late?
Right.
And that's where my passion is, Dean. If you can't tell, I'm very passionate about this, right?
Like, I couldn't tell at all. I couldn't tell.
Yeah, I live and breathe this now because I'm so
awesome.
frustrated. I'm so frustrated. Yeah. I'm so frustrated, man, because I watch it every single day. Yeah. You know, they're talking about defunding the police. Hell, don't defund the police. Reallocate the funds and give them the right training that they should have gotten in the first place. And everybody will win. The governments will win. The agencies will win. And most importantly, my brothers and sisters will win. And we will reduce the amount of suicides. Right. But until we take it serious, and we don't just focus on the prevention, we actually focus on education and preparation. When we start focusing on that, and we help them to understand that there's a whole social emotional aspect to this job besides the physical, man, what an amazing country we would have if we would do that.
So Sean, I want to take a correlation for a minute. So if you, and I know it's hard to do, but if we were to lump all the first responders, we were, to lump all the law enforcement, corrections, dispatchers, everybody under one umbrella for a moment. And then we take that cross correlation and we look at the suicides in that graph, if you will, and compare it to, because what seems to get more attention nowadays, anytime you talk about suicides, a lot of times is what comes up is military. And, the 22 a day, which in its own right is an epidemic that needs to, and the military has been pouring millions upon millions of dollars into education and prevention. And there are a tremendous, I've had guest after guest on the show all across the country, starting up their own nonprofits, their own organizations, for-profits, whatever, everything under the sun, trying to address the aspect of suicides. Now, one of the things that I want to share is that it almost feels like the tables have turned. Now, maybe that has been so this is maybe perhaps my own perception, but it seems like the attention it's almost like lopsided. I get it. Once you put on the uniform, whether it's blue or green, right? It doesn't matter color. It seems like it gets in your blood. But the thing that I want to share is I believe that, awareness needs to become more for the law enforcement and first responder community there. And I think you talked about it beautifully. And I love the passion aspect is a lot of people immediately when they hear about trauma and PTSD or suicides, they go right to a lot of times military. And have you seen that as well? It almost feels a bit lopsided. Everybody automatically shifts their focus to the military. Versus it's almost maybe not talked about enough for the law enforcement community and first responders?
I got to be honest with you. I don't see it that way. And the reason why is because I'm not in touch with the military as much as I used to be. But I do agree. They are so far leaps and bounds beyond. And I don't know if you know this or not, but Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman wrote the foreword for our book.
Nice.
Right?
Nice.
Yeah. And he said, man, like when he wrote the foreword, he said, this is one of the most important challenges of your lifetime. I hope you realize this. You're getting ready to take on something that most people would not dare take on. You're going to have, and I thought with his endorsement, honestly, I thought this was going to be easy. I thought people were going to open their doors wide open and let us in and let us start having these conversations and these trainings and these opportunities and getting these books into people's hands and, finding, corporations that would buy the books and give them to their agencies locally. No, man, that's not the case at all. Matter of fact, the doors have been shut.
Why do you feel that is? Do you feel that if people admit that, then they're admitting that they're broken?
Yes, I think that's a big part of it. I think it shows, there's problems. If we have people that are suicidal, or we have people that are admitting that they have thought about killing themselves, that makes us look bad, And that's sad, man, because that's an egoic approach, right? That really is an egoic approach for an administration, right? You need to look at it from a deeper, more emotional level and say, look, if my troops are better, my community's naturally going to be better. Right. If my officers are well educated on the front end, there's a higher probability that they're going to survive and thrive on the back end. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that's the frustration that I face daily, not just with my own department, but just across the state of Florida. Is like, look, we have been in this for a long time. It's not like this just happened overnight. We've known about this. You guys, the government has had conversations, right? There's been round tables and all kinds of things, yet no solutions have seemed to come forward that actually are legitimately addressing the problem.
Right. Yeah. It's certainly and I think a lot of times when people pull back the layers, at least in my perspective, when people start pulling back the layers, they're like, holy crap, this is a bigger animal than what I realized. It goes deeper. It's been around longer, but nobody was talking about it maybe 20, 30 years ago. Maybe it was more taboo than what it is now. And it's still, and as you're, and in your words too, Sean, it's still not accepted in certain areas. It's still not as, it's like, whoa, hold up there. Wait, we don't have a problem.
Yeah.
It's like you just had 2 officers, or and even the same, I think back to, because that's my frame of reference, is even in the military, right? Military's big campaign, hey, you're showing strength to reach out and all this. And at the soldier level, at the Joe level, that Joe is going, oh, hell no, because I know that if I show up and I admit, like, hey, I'm having issues, what's the first word? The first word that jumps in my head, the old school term is broke dick. Hey, you're broke. There's something the matter with them. So now they're not a combat multiplier. They're not an asset to the organization.
Yeah.
Yep. And that could be the same for maybe a police officer, right? Or whatever, firefighter, paramedic, whatever industry you're in. And so I think there's this whole concept, and so really the entire narrative needs to change. And it doesn't mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean that you're, you can't be effective. It just means you have stuff to work out to be more effective.
That's exactly what, and think about it, right? If let's say we started this in the academies, right? In police academy, before they ever get a job, they get a chance to go back and go, wow, especially when we start talking about trauma-informed care approach, right? That's something we talk about in our book, is a trauma-informed care approach, which something in that is called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. A lot of what I went through, right? The abuse, was your mom and dad an alcoholic? Did your mom and dad get incarcerated? Did you deal with mental and physical abuse? Did you deal with sexual abuse? Did you all these different, there's like 10 different little categories, right? But a large majority of our population has at least one or more adverse childhood experiences. And then out of that 67%, there's like 27% of that 67% scores a 4 or higher. When you don't address those things, I was like an 8, Dean, So like when you don't address those things, that leads to poor mental health. Right. That leads to lower life expectancy. That leads to poverty. Less likely to thrive in the world, to survive, to not just survive, but to actually live, right? To live your life, to have good relationships, right? All those things come to order. And then let's not even get into the illnesses, the heart disease and the cancer and all the different things that are, it's a higher likelihood that you will get those things. Not because you scored a 4 or higher, but because you didn't address the fact that you had all those things and you need to deal with. If you address them, you're guess what? everything starts to go down. You improve upon yourself. So, anybody that's sitting back there right now that's listening to this, and they've been sticking stuff in the back of their subconscious brain, thinking that they can get away with that and nobody else is going to ever find out. And they're not going to, that's not true, man. It's actually going to destroy you. It will destroy you from the inside out, and you'll never even realize it. By the time you realize it, it'll be too late.
Right.
And that's what we've got to educate our guys on. And as we're educating them, we're not telling them they're broken. If I was to go in and train current police officers, say in New York, the last thing I would ever tell them is they're broken. You know what I tell them? I'd say, you guys are more resilient than you could ever possibly imagine. And it was done, by design, because the more we see things, the more we become adaptable to the things that we see, right? The more death that we see, the more adaptable and natural it becomes. Right. And so we have to get to that point and help them. I've had so many people that have read the book, and after they read the book and reflected, they said, wow, I need to go talk to somebody. And guess what? Phone call after phone call. Hey, man, your book saved my life.
Wow.
Your book allowed me to get the openness and the understanding that there's nothing wrong with me, that I just need to go and deal with what happened to me. Right. That's the other thing, right? Let's change the question. Is it about what's wrong with you? No. It's about what happened to you. Now, let's take that from an individual perspective and let's put it into a cultural perspective when we're interacting with our communities, right? When we're interacting with our communities and we're addressing them, and we're going, man, what's wrong with you, man? You keep selling drugs. You keep going out here and getting yourself arrested. What's wrong with you? Let's flip the script and let's go. It's not about what's wrong with you. It's about what happened to you. What happened to you that put you on the streets in the first place? Because if we can address that, guess what? We can have, great reform programs and resources and opportunities for the people in our communities. And our officers can recognize, hey, this is somebody that needs some help. They need some resources before it does get to the point where they're at that point of no return.
Right. Sean,
so it's a win. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to ask Sean, have you, has there been any talk or has there been any conversations with the departments or organizations that run these, police academy schools or anything?
I have worked on my local academy, and I'm trying. Matter of fact, I've just gotten into where I can start teaching their curriculum.
Okay.
But I'm trying to implement my curriculum into it, right? And that's just a time period, right? It takes time. You have to build trust with them, and they've got to know that what you're like, they're not just going to take anything, right? They want to know that what you're giving out there is legitimate information, it's validated, it's credible, which all of our stuff is. All of our stuff is resourced, it's analyzed, it's been approved. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't just go out there and throw some stuff together. Plus, I street tested everything that I talk about in going beyond the call. Like, this was something that I worked on for like 3 years, street testing, the way I spoke to people, the way I interacted with people, the way I addressed stress and trauma and all those things. So when we wrote this book, it wasn't just, I think if we write this will work. It was, I road tested, because I know as a trainer, I've been a high liability trainer for a long time. You better not bring it to your troops until it's been tested and true before you bring it to them. Because if you do, you're going to look like a fool. Right. And they're going to laugh you out the door and go, you can't be serious. Right.
Yeah. Lose all credibility for sure. You certainly don't want to do anything like that. Let me ask you, Sean, if somebody's going through their own journey of trauma or dealing with issues from the past, what is, if you could share a few maybe tips or ideas that they could do now to help them find their way, could you share that with them?
I can. So there are a lot of organizations, like you said, a lot of nonprofit organizations. First of all, let me tell you this, and this is probably going to upset some people, but you don't have to do it through your department. You don't. You can go outside of your organization and find the help and find the resources, and your insurance will probably cover a lot of it, believe it or not, right? There are a ton If you go online and you start, Cop Logic is one that comes to mind. Survive First. My friend Doug Monda down in South Florida is another one that comes to mind. Warriors Rest Foundation. I believe they're based Texas, Oklahoma, Midwest, that area. I mean, there's a lot of great organizations. The Birdwell Foundation. I can't forget them. They've got an amazing program with counselors all over the country. And these things are very cost effective. A lot of them are free. A lot of them, you can pick up the phone and talk to somebody and remain anonymous. You don't have to give your name or, so many people are worried about what if somebody finds out. Here's the thing. What if somebody doesn't? Right? That's what you got to really start asking yourself. What if somebody doesn't find out? What if you keep living this charade, right? And you continue to try to live this fake life. At some point, it does catch up with you. And you just pray that when it does catch up with you, that you're not in a bad place, So there are a lot of resources. There's a lot of books, mine included. Obviously, I would highly recommend my book. I feel like we have taken the time to really go through and put the information in there that anybody can read from 6th grade and up, to understand the process, what your body goes through, the different types of trauma that we face in our industry, how the chemicals work in our body, how our brain works, right? We not only went through the physical, we went through the science of it as well and broke all of that down. We talk about emotional intelligence. We talk about, the different types of trauma. We talk about trauma-informed care approach. So there's a lot of different aspects that we tie into it. And again, very cost effective. We're getting ready to, as a matter of fact, this is the first time I've released this. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I'm in the middle right now. I'm in the middle right now of creating a training program online that's going to be super cost effective that any first responder or public safety professional can tap into and get the resource and get the training for that specific thing that they want. I've actually just got everything put together. As a matter of fact, I'm meeting with somebody at 2:00 today to start working on that process to get that out there, because I'm so tired of agencies going, well, we'll have to come back and look at that later. No, man, that is not fair to your officers, man. That is not fair to those guys that are out there drinking themselves to death every night and then showing back up, the audacity, showing back up and working their butts off for you. And you're still saying, well, we're going to put that on the back end. No, that's not okay. So I'm going to start trying to put resources together and do it from a different avenue, since I can't get it in through the departments at this point. And they're just not, it's just, I don't know, man. I don't understand it. I don't get it. If you're an administrator and you get it and you can educate me, I would love to know, because I'm at that point where I'm like, all right, you know what? I try to do it this way. That's not going to work. So I've got to find a different avenue. Right.
Absolutely. Sean, where can they find your book? Is that on your website?
It is. The easiest way is just gbtcbook.com. Takes you right to the Amazon link, and you can get the book right there. Real simple. You can also go on our website, which is gbtc911.com. And there's a link to the book there as well. There's also other resources. Soon I'll be linking in the training that we're putting together with this company that we're going to be working with. And I'm super excited, man, to get that off the ground, because it's going to finally give us a platform where I can send people to, instead of saying, hey, if you can get me into your agency. No, you're not going to have to wait, man. We're going to get you the help that you need. For every law enforcement officer, firefighter, EMS, this is going to be for all of you, every single one of you that deserve to get this training, that should have gotten this training. For all of you that are coming in, for your wives, for your kids, if they're old enough and they're ready for that type, we're going to have it set up where it has everybody in mind in our community to make them better.
I love how you mention the family as well, because
so important, man.
A lot of times they always get forgotten about. We focus on the member and not the family. It's treating everything as a whole. And I love the aspect too. You talked about intelligent trauma, I think was one of the terms. And a lot of people don't realize how the body can, has like the ability to memorize things, or at the cellular level, like almost absorb it.
Right? Physiological, right? Physiological trauma. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's very interesting. That's why a lot of people don't realize, if I can take meds, I'm good. Or if I take a drink a night, it numbs the pain, but that's why things pop up down the road.
Right.
Things trigger other things and they pop up down the road. But I like how, I heard somebody use one time saying it's not an issue if it pops up down the road, because that's God's way of saying, hey, I'm giving you an opportunity to deal with it and get rid of it.
That's right.
And, it's our choice what we do. But I really love the aspect of just how passionate you are, Sean, about this issue. And obviously it's something that you walked through, number one, but number two, certainly you're impacting lives. So just want to say thank you for what you're doing. Is there anything before we close today? Is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I would say that just kind of going back with what you were talking about with alcohol and depression, and maybe you're out there right now, man, and you're one of the ones that are hitting that bottle every night. Look, that's your coping mechanism, but I want you to understand that there's better ones, okay? And a lot of times, what we see as a problem, other people see as the solution. And right now, that's probably what you see that as your solution. But the truth is, there's better ones. But the only way to find out about them is to get out there and be willing to open yourself up, man. And I know that's a hard thing to do. It was not easy for me to do. It's not easy for anybody to do. You know what? And the truth is, the devil is counting on us not opening up, man. That's the truth of it. He's counting on you self-destructing yourself, self-destroying yourself. And you don't have to look at it from a spiritual side. You can look at it from just a general side and look at it, right? You're self-destructing and you don't even realize it. Right? If you're having problems at home, if you're cheating on your wife or your significant other, spouse, significant other, if you are addicted to something, even if you're like a gym rat and you're working out all the time, if you see yourself trying to get into more training because you don't want to be on the road, because you don't like interacting with your community, because you're tired of your job, because you're angry at the world, you blame everybody else for your problems, and you still haven't gone to do anything to address it for yourself, this is your wake-up call. This is your opportunity right now to address it, to deal with it, to move forward, to let go of it, and be able to move forward with the life that you're really meant to live. So, Dean, I really appreciate you, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the Red, White, and You. I love your title. It's so cool, man. And just thank you for allowing me to share my heart and my passion for this. And hope some people will be willing to reach out. I would love to talk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for being on, Sean. My guest today, Sean Wyman. Sean, once again, thank you so much for being on today. It's always a pleasure, and we look forward to keeping tabs on you and seeing the good things that you're doing.
Yes, sir. Thank you.